It is an age-old problem in cities across America: rats.
New York City declared war, releasing millions of specialized rat responders into the streets. But this was not a simple pest control operation. It was a high-tech offensive that triggered an unexpected chain reaction, revealing something hidden beneath the city that no one was prepared for.
And we're going to take a real serious approach to ending this rat tail.
We're going to uncover the story of this massive deployment. It doesn't involve the predators you might be imagining, but the reality is far stranger. We'll explore the secret data, the high-tech devices, and the citywide panic that forced this drastic move. The truth behind this chain reaction is more complex than anyone predicted. New York's oldest war. The scale of this problem is frankly hard to wrap your head around. What most people don't realize is that New York's rat problem isn't just rats in the subway, it's a parallel ecology. In 2014, a landmark study by statistician Jonathan Auerbach at Columbia University tried to get a real count. The old urban legend was one rat for every human. The reality, he found, was closer to one rat for every 4 humans. That's still 2 million rodents. These aren't scattered, lonely creatures. They are organized, resilient, and they live in dynasties. Genetic research from Fordham University in 2017 even revealed that rats have distinct uptown and downtown genetic profiles. They are, quite literally, native New Yorkers with family trees and neighborhood loyalties. This isn't a new problem. It's the city's oldest war. The brown rat is not native to North America. It arrived in the 1700s, a stowaway on the very same European trading ships that docked in Lower Manhattan and built the city's fortune. They came ashore in barrels of grain and cargo holds, and they found a paradise. By the early 19th century, as New York's human population swelled past 200,000, the rats had already built an unseen kingdom. They thrived in the dark, damp basements of tenements, in the bloody gutters of slaughterhouses, and along the docks of the East River. And get this, when the city tried to modernize, it only made the rats stronger. In the late 19th century, engineers like George Waring Jr. designed the city's first large-scale brick-lined sewer system. It was a marvel of modern sanitation, meant to flush away waste and disease, but it also served as a massive citywide subway system for rats. These tunnels, stretching for hundreds of miles, connected nearly every block, every building, and every basement by the 1880s. The rats now had a sheltered, temperature-controlled highway to move around, completely safe from the world above. The city's attempts to fight back were, for 100 years, almost laughably ineffective. In the 1890s, sanitary reformers led by Colonel Waring created the White Wings, sanitation workers in white uniforms who swept the streets. They were celebrated for cleaning up the mountains of filth. But the city's waste disposal system was still based on open garbage piles and unsealed ash barrels. They were basically just setting out a nightly buffet for the rat population. As New York entered the 20th century, the population exploding past 3 million, the rats became a terrifying public health issue. By the 1940s, the Department of Health began mapping infestations, realizing they correlated perfectly with decaying housing and uncollected waste. The first official rat control campaigns began in 1949, but the city's Bureau of Pest Control admitted they met limited success. Why? The core of the problem remained. Garbage. New York City produces more than 12,000 tons of residential garbage every single day. For decades, the system was simple. Stuff it all in thin black plastic bags and pile those bags on the sidewalk. These trash mountains would sit out for hours, sometimes all night, before collection. For the rats, this wasn't a trash pile. This was a 5-star, all-you-can-eat restaurant open 24/7. The post-war boom made it worse. New public housing complexes built in the 1950s and 60s, with their maze of utility tunnels and boiler rooms, became rat super condos. Then came the fiscal crisis of the 1970s. Sanitation budgets were slashed. Entire neighborhoods were left with rotting garbage piled stories high. The rat population exploded. They became symbols of urban decay, starring in movies and news reports as the true owners of the city. This long, losing battle set the stage for a perfect storm. And in 2020, that storm finally hit. When the COVID-19 pandemic shut down the world, it shut down New York City. Restaurants, offices, and hotels closed overnight. For the 2 million rat army, this was an apocalypse. Their primary food source, thousands of tons of commercial food waste, vanished. And the crazy part is, they didn't just starve, they got angry. In May of 2020, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention issued a national advisory. They warned of unusual or aggressive rodent behavior as rats, desperate for food, were forced to relocate. They swarmed into residential zones where people were now locked down, producing more household trash than ever. The city's 311 hotline lit up. In 2022, officials logged over 26,000 rat sightings, a 60% increase from 2019. The rats were more visible, more brazen, and more dangerous than ever. This wasn't just an ick factor, it was a serious health crisis. The city's Department of Health noted a terrifying spike in leptospirosis. This is a nasty bacterial disease transmitted through rat urine. It contaminates floodwater in basements or puddles on sidewalks. If it gets into your system, it can cause kidney failure and liver damage. Between 2021 and 2023, New York documented 49 confirmed cases. In 2023 alone, there were 24 cases, the highest number ever recorded in the city's history. These outbreaks were concentrated in the exact same neighborhoods with the highest rat sightings. The city was at a tipping point. The trash bag buffets, the sewer highways, and the pandemic-fueled desperation had created a superpopulation of rodents. The old ways, a trap here, some poison there, were a joke. The city was losing. Mayor Eric Adams, a man known for his blunt talk, famously declared, "Rats don't run this city." But the data said otherwise. To win this war, the city needed a new plan, a new leader, and a new kind of weapon. They needed something drastic. They needed to go on the offensive. Starving the enemy. By 2023, New York City had to face the truth. Its centuries-long war on rats had been a total failure. The pandemic had exposed just how vulnerable the city was. The surging 311 complaints and the terrifying rise in leptospirosis cases meant the old playbook had to be thrown out. So here's the deal. Mayor Eric Adams decided to restructure the entire government to focus on this one single problem. On April 12, 2023, he announced the creation of a brand new office, the Office of Rodent Mitigation. This was a centralized command center, a war room, and at its helm, he appointed Kathleen Karate, an urban ecology and pest management specialist. The press immediately dubbed her the Rat Czar, and her appointment was historic. It was the first time in New York's history that a single authority was responsible for coordinating all aspects of rat control. What most people don't realize is why this was such a big deal. Before Karate, the city's efforts were a bureaucratic mess. The Department of Health handled inspections, the Department of Sanitation handled trash, the Parks Department handled parks, and the Housing Department handled building violations. And get this, they barely talked to each other. An inspector from the Health Department could find a massive infestation, but they didn't have a direct line to force the Sanitation Department to change its pickup schedule for that block. It was a system designed to fail. Karate's new office, reporting directly to the mayor, changed everything. Her team integrated all the cross-agency data, sanitation schedules, housing complaints, health reports into a single unified digital map. For the first time, the city could see the entire battlefield. The first part of the plan wasn't high-tech, it was about brute force. The city launched a program called Get Stuff Clean, and it was exactly what it sounded like. They identified over 1,000 high-priority rat mitigation zones across the 5 boroughs. These were the absolute worst of the worst neighborhoods: Harlem, Chinatown, Bushwick, Inwood, and the Bronx's Grand Concourse. These areas, with their dense housing and aging infrastructure, were the rats' breeding grounds. In these zones, crews intensified street cleaning, doubled their waste pickups, and within 6 months, removed over 1,500 tons of debris. Sanitation and housing teams worked side by side. While one team was clearing garbage, the other was ticketing landlords for not sealing cracks in their building foundations. But the real genius of the plan wasn't just cleaning, it was about food. Karate and the Adams administration knew that you can't control 2 million rats if you're still feeding them 12,000 tons of garbage every night. The solution? A long-delayed, massively expensive, and logistically nightmarish reform: the trash containerization program. This sounds boring, but it was revolutionary. The goal was to end the era of the black plastic trash bag. The city began forcing all buildings to store their garbage in sealed, rigid, rat-resistant bins. No more sidewalk buffets. This had been proposed for decades, but building owners and politicians always resisted. It was too expensive, and in a city as dense as New York, there was simply no space on the sidewalks for thousands of new bins. The Adams administration forced it through. Starting in July 2023, all residential properties with up to 9 units had to use these new bins. Larger buildings and businesses followed in early 2024. Sanitation Commissioner Jessica Tisch explained that this was the single most important modernization of New York's waste system in a century. The intent was simple: starve the enemy, and they paired this with another, even simpler idea. They changed the time. Previously, buildings could put their trash out on the sidewalk as early as 4 p.m. This meant the rats had from dusk until the early morning pickup to feast. The new rules, which went into effect in April 2023, delayed the set-out time to 8 p.m. It's not that simple, though. This small change was a tactical nuke. It reduced the nightly feeding window by nearly 70%. Data from pilot areas showed a 68% reduction in visible rat activity within 3 months. Just by changing the clock, they were dismantling the rats' entire food supply chain. The new war plan also had teeth. The city amended the Housing Maintenance Code. Landlords who failed to clean up or address infestations were hit with fines ranging from $300 to $2,000. In 2023, the Department of Health conducted over 150,000 proactive inspections, a 20% jump from before the pandemic. But punishment wasn't the only tool. The city expanded its Rat Academy. Yes, you heard that right. A free workshop to train landlords, superintendents, and regular residents on how to think like a rat in order to defeat one. They taught exclusion techniques, how to find and seal every tiny crack and pipe opening with steel wool and concrete. This was a total paradigm shift. The city was finally treating the rat problem as a single ecological system. It was a war on 2 fronts: infrastructure and food. They were redesigning the entire city to be hostile to rodents. The data started to show it was working. By the end of 2023, the city recorded its first citywide decline in rat sightings in years, a 14% drop. It was a start, but it wasn't enough. Cleaning and starving was the defense. Now it was time to go on the offense. It was time to unleash the solvers, a new kind of hunter. So about those millions of rat solvers from the title, when New York City announced its new offensive, the public imagination ran wild. People pictured bioengineered predators, armies of cats, or something out of a sci-fi movie sweeping through the subway tunnels. Yeah, about that, the truth was way more practical and in some ways even more futuristic. The solvers weren't animals. They were data. They were an army of smart devices, sensors, and high-tech traps, all reporting back to a central command. The backbone of this new offensive was the Rat Information Portal, or RIP. This was the city's new public-facing war map. First launched in 2010, it was completely redesigned in 2023. It now combined all the data: every 311 complaint, every sanitation violation, every housing inspection, and every health report, all on a single block-by-block map. Residents could finally see the hot zones in their own neighborhood. But the real power was for the city agencies. Karate's team could now use this data to predict infestations before they happened. They could see a spike in trash complaints on one block and dispatch sanitation teams before it turned into a rat sighting spike a week later. This data-driven approach was then deployed in the rat mitigation zones, or RMZs. These were the super hot zones: East Harlem, Bedford-Stuyvesant, the Grand Concourse, that would become the testing ground for the city's new arsenal. This is where the solvers were released. The city invested $3.5 million in new rodent control technology and another $1.7 million in staffing. First, they deployed new, safer methods for borough-level management. Instead of just dumping poison, which can harm pets and other wildlife, crews started using high-tech oxygen deprivation systems. They would flood underground burrow networks with carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide gas. This method was fast, effective, and had zero environmental risk. It addressed entire colonies without a single drop of toxic bait. But the real game changer was a device that looked almost friendly. It was a sleek green and white box called the EcoMeal. This Italian-designed system was the star of the new arsenal. It wasn't a simple snap trap, it was a smart multi-capture device. Here's how it works. Instead of poison, the EcoMeal uses a non-toxic food-based bait as an attractant. Rats, drawn by the smell, climb a small ladder to a platform. When they step onto the platform, a sensor is triggered. The platform floor drops open and the rat falls into a sealed container below. Inside, a non-toxic liquid solution quickly and humanely euthanizes the rodent. The trap then automatically resets itself, ready for the next one. The crazy part is what happens next. Each time a rat is captured, the EcoMeal digitally records the event. These stations, piloted by the hundreds in Bedford-Stuyvesant and East Harlem, were all connected to a live dashboard managed by the city's Office of Technology and Innovation. This was the chain reaction no one predicted. It wasn't a biological chain reaction of predators and prey, it was a data chain reaction. For the first time in history, the city wasn't just reacting to rat sightings. They were tracking the enemy's movements in real time. The Rat Czars team could literally watch on a screen as an EcoMeal unit outside a specific apartment building captured 3 rats on Monday, 5 on Tuesday, and 8 on Wednesday. This real-time data was a weapon. It meant technicians didn't have to waste time checking empty traps. Field data showed the EcoMeal units cut manual servicing time by 30%. More importantly, it allowed the city to be proactive. If a trap's capture rate suddenly spiked, they knew they had a new infestation before any resident even saw a rat. They could surge sanitation teams and inspectors to that exact building immediately. The city didn't release millions of these traps, but these thousands of smart traps and sensors acted like a network of millions of spies reporting back from the front lines. They were the solvers, not just of rats, but of the information gap that had allowed the rats to win for so long. This combination of tech and sanitation was devastatingly effective. The Office of Rodent Mitigation's 2024 progress report laid out the victory. In the targeted rat mitigation zones, rat sighting complaints fell by a staggering 55% within the first year. East Harlem's complaints, which had been around 3,200, plummeted to 1,400. The Grand Concourse in the Bronx saw its complaints drop from 2,800 to 1,300. The solvers were working. The city's investment in data, technology, and engineering was finally turning the tide in a war that had lasted for 200 years. But the tech, as powerful as it was, couldn't win the war alone. The rats still had allies. The 8.5 million humans who, through simple, everyday habits, were still feeding the enemy. The city needed to activate its own army. The tech was only half the story. The other half was a civilian resistance. The hidden battleground. The high-tech solvers and the new containerization rules were changing the battlefield. But Kathleen Karate and the city's leadership knew that no amount of tech could solve a problem that was at its core about human behavior. For centuries, New York had waged a chemical war against its shadow population, a war of poisons, sticky traps, and snap traps. And for centuries, it had lost. The poisons created super rats resistant to toxins. The traps were a joke against an army that replaced its soldiers faster than they could be eliminated. The city produces 12,000 tons of trash every single day. That isn't just a statistic, it's a buffet. It's a mountain of discarded pizza crusts, half-eaten hot dogs, and leaking garbage bags. The rat's empire wasn't built on sewers, it was built on that trash. Karate, the city's first ever rat czar, understood this. The new containers were a critical first step, a form of resource denial. But to truly win, to break a cycle that had lasted since the city's founding, New York had to mobilize a new army. An army that didn't clock out at 5 p.m., an army that lived on the front lines. They had to mobilize its own citizens. This led to the expansion of one of the city's most brilliantly named programs, the Community Rat Academy. This wasn't just a boring public health seminar pamphlet handed out at a community board meeting. This was essentially a civilian resistance training program. It was a strategic shift, acknowledging that the government couldn't be on every block, in every basement, and in every alley. The free workshops were designed to train property owners, building superintendents, and everyday residents to become certified community monitors. It was an exercise in turning the hunted into the hunters. By 2023, over 5,000 participants had graduated from this boot camp. And what most people don't realize is what they learned. This wasn't a please tidy up lecture. This was a know your enemy masterclass. They were trained first and foremost to think like a rat. Forget everything you think you know. Rats, they learned, have terrible eyesight. They are virtually blind in daylight. Instead, they navigate by touch and smell. They hug walls, using their whiskers and guard hairs to feel their way through the dark. This behavior, called thigmotaxis, is their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. This is where the trainers introduced the key piece of evidence, rub marks. They showed attendees slides of greasy dark stains running along pipes and baseboards. These weren't just dirt. This was the sebum from the rat's fur mixed with filth built up over thousands of trips. These rub marks weren't just trails, they were scent-marked highways, screaming to other rats. This way to the food, this path is safe. Then they learned about the rat's physical prowess. A rat, they were taught, can squeeze through a hole the size of a quarter, not a silver dollar. A quarter, how? Their skeletons are collapsible. If they can get their skull through, the rest of the body follows like liquid. They can jump 3 feet in the air. They can fall 5 stories and survive. They can tread water for 3 days. And their teeth. The instructors spent significant time on their teeth. A rat's incisors never stop growing. To keep them filed down, they must chew, and they can chew through anything: wood, plastic, electrical wires, brick, and even lead pipes and soft concrete. Armed with this terrifying knowledge, the cadets were then taught how to fight back. This was the burrow mitigation module. They learned to identify burrows and, most importantly, how to seal them permanently. This was the most critical lesson: stop using the wrong materials. Flimsy foam? That's not a barrier, that's an appetizer for a rat. Wood? That's just a chew toy. The academy taught them the unchewable arsenal. They learned to pack holes first with steel wool or a copper mesh, which tears at a rat's gums and teeth, making it painful to chew. Then, they were taught to seal that mesh in with hardware cloth, a rigid quarter-inch steel mesh, and finally to cover it all with a specialized metal-infused cement patch. This wasn't a temporary fix. This was structural warfare. These 5,000 graduates became the city's eyes and ears. They were the local watchdogs, certified in rodent proofing. A building superintendent who graduated from the academy no longer just called 311 to complain. They now walked their property lines at dusk, the rat happy hour. They hunted for those greasy rub marks. They inspected their basements for quarter-size gaps. They documented risks, sealed foundation cracks before they became an infestation, and coordinated directly with city agencies, speaking the same language. This education-first model was designed to foster long-term behavioral change, reducing the city's reliance on poisons and building a culture of prevention. This grassroots framework was then supercharged by community groups. The Rat Academy had created the Special Forces, and now the neighborhood groups were building the infantry. Organizations like We Love Bed-Stuy, East Harlem 360, and the Bronx Community Cleanup Coalition began organizing their own block cleanups and burrow mitigation events. They targeted the no-man's land properties, the neglected lots, the overgrown alleyways, and the spaces between buildings that city crews often missed. These were the places where rats thrived, the unsecured staging grounds from which they launched their nightly raids on the city's trash bags. The city's Adopt a Basket program also grew, with over 1,200 sealed heavy-duty litter bins now co-managed by residents and local businesses. This was more than just a sponsorship, it was a psychological shift. For decades, sanitation was seen as a passive government service. You put your trash out, and someone else, the city, dealt with it. This program turned that idea on its head. It made sanitation a shared civic duty. It personalized the fight. It was your corner, your basket. And the data backed it up. Studies showed that neighborhoods with active community-led cleanups and high participation in these programs saw up to 40% fewer infestations than those that relied on city services alone. This new war even extended into the city's iconic green spaces, which had always been rat strongholds. Parks are a paradise for rats, endless soft soil for burrowing and a constant supply of food from picnics and overflowing bins. The Central Park Conservancy conducted a high-tech survey in 2023 using GPS mapping to identify over 1,100 active rat burrows. Think about that. Over 1,000 distinct colonies. Each one was then systematically addressed, not just with poison, but through soil compaction using machinery to crush the burrow networks and targeted vegetation trimming, removing the dense ground cover that rats use to hide from hawks and owls. In Brooklyn's Prospect Park, the effort was even more visceral. Volunteers, fueled by this new sense of civic duty, collected nearly 50 tons of litter in a single year. That's 100,000 pounds of rat food removed from the ecosystem by hand. So here's the deal, the millions of rat solvers from the title. It wasn't a lie, but it was a misdirection. The public was looking for a silver bullet, a high-tech Pied Piper, and the Echo Meal traps were part of the story, but they weren't the solvers. They were data collectors. They provided the proof of where the rats were. The real solvers were something far more powerful. The solvers were the millions of new sealed trash bins rolled out across the city, cutting off the all-night buffet. They were the millions of hours of feeding time eliminated by the new set-out rules, which forced residents to put trash out at 8 p.m. instead of 4 p.m. They were the 5,000 graduates of the Rat Academy who are now sealing burrows with steel wool and concrete, and they were the millions of data points collected by the new smart tech, creating a chain reaction of information that finally allowed the city to outthink its ancient enemy. This is the real story. It's not about a magical predator. It's not about one new trap. It's about a slower, more difficult, and more permanent solution. It's about a grand, unglamorous synthesis of urban engineering, the bins, data science, the mapping, and community action, the people. But the thing is, people watching this are probably looking for the mystery, for the twist. Is this all true? Are we missing a key detail? The truth is, the war is far from over. The city's 14% drop in rat sightings and the massive 55% drop in the designated hot zones are massive, unprecedented victories. They are statistical proof that the system is working, but that still leaves an army of rats in the shadows. The core of the problem remains. A city of nearly 9 million people packed onto a tiny island generating mountains of food waste every single day. The city's new plan is the most effective in its history. But its greatest strength is also its greatest weakness. It relies on everyone doing their part. It relies on the landlord to seal the cracks, the resident to use the bin, the business owner to adopt their corner basket, and the city to pick up the trash on time. If any one part of that chain breaks, a sanitation strike, a budget cut, a new wave of resident apathy, the rats come back. They always come back. The chain reaction New York predicted was a drop in the rat population. The chain reaction they got was a total transformation in how the city sees itself. It's no longer just a collection of individuals. It's a single complex ecosystem. And in this ecosystem, the war on rats is really just a war on human waste. New York, after 400 years, is finally learning to clean up after itself. It's a war fought with data and trash cans, not with monsters. But here's the question, is it even possible to win, or is this just a permanent, expensive truce? Let us know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe.